After Michael kicked me out of the house, I got a job as a cook in a small diner downtown. Every day when I left work, I saw the same old lady sitting on the corner asking for spare change. She was older than me, with a face marked by the sun and trembling hands. Something in her eyes reminded me of my own mother. I started stopping in front of her. I would give her some coins or sometimes some bread left over from the kitchen. We never spoke much. Just a gesture, a tired smile, and I would continue my way to the boarding house where I now lived alone. I was 69 years old when my son told me there was no longer room for me in that house. He did not raise his voice. There was no scene. He simply looked at me from across the table and said it was time for me to find my own space. He said he had his life and his plans, and that I had to understand what I did not know until much later. I remember packing my things in an old bag. Clothes. Some documents, a photo of when Michael was little. Nothing else. I did not have much. I had lived my whole life taking care of that house, that son, that family that was now closing the door on me with a cold courtesy that hurt more than any insult. I did not cry in front of him. I did not give him that satisfaction. I left with my head held high, although inside I felt like something was breaking. It was like walking on glass barefoot, but without letting anyone notice the pain. The boarding house where I found a room was small and dark. The walls had water stains, and the mattress creaked every time I moved. But it was what I could afford with what was left of my Social Security. Michael had given me nothing. He did not even offer to help me with the first month of rent. I spent the first night sleepless, staring at the ceiling, wondering at what moment everything had gone wrong. I had been a good mother. I had given him everything. I had worked until my body could give no more. I had given up my dreams and my desires so that he would have what I never had. And now I was here alone, old, invisible. But I could not stay still. I could not afford the luxury of sinking into sadness. I needed money. I needed to eat. So I went out to look for work. I knocked on many doors. At some places, they did not even let me finish speaking. "We do not hire people your age," they told me with an uncomfortable smile. At others, they looked me up and down and shook their heads before I even said my name. Until I arrived at Mr. George's restaurant. It was a modest place with wooden tables and checkered tablecloths. It smelled of fried onions and fresh coffee. Mr. George was a man of about 50 with gray hair and big calloused hands. He looked at me in silence when I told him I was looking for work. "Do you know how to cook?" he asked me. "I have cooked all my life," I replied. He nodded. "Start tomorrow, 6 in the morning. Do not be late." There was no contract, there were no papers, just a handshake and the promise of a weekly wage. It was not much, but it was enough to pay for the boarding house and buy some food. That night I slept a little better. I had a purpose. I had something to do. The work at the restaurant was hard. I spent hours on my feet peeling potatoes, cutting vegetables, stirring huge pots. My hands filled with small burns, my feet swelled at the end of the day. But I did not complain. I could not afford that luxury. The other employees were young. They looked at me with curiosity at first, then with indifference. I did not talk much. I did my job and left. I was not looking for friends. I was not looking for pity. It was on one of those afternoons when leaving the restaurant that I saw her for the first time. She was sitting on the corner near the bus stop. She had white, messy hair and dirty, torn clothes. In front of her was a rusty can with some coins. I walked past the first time, not because I did not want to help, but because I barely had anything myself. But something made me turn around. Maybe it was her look. Maybe it was the memory of my own mother, who had also aged in silence, always waiting for someone to see her. The next day I stopped in front of her. I took some coins out of my pocket and dropped them into the can. She looked up and looked at me with tired eyes. She said nothing. She just nodded slightly. That became a routine. Every day when leaving work, I would stop in front of her. Sometimes I gave her money, other times a piece of bread I had saved from the restaurant. We never spoke. Just that silent exchange of humanity. Weeks passed, then months. My life had been reduced to that. Work, walk, sleep. I had no news from Michael. I did not look for him. I did not want to know about him. But there was something that unsettled me. Lately, when I passed in front of the boarding house, I felt like someone was watching me. Once I saw a shadow move behind a window. Another time, while going up the stairs, I heard footsteps moving away quickly. I downplayed it. I thought it was my imagination. That loneliness was playing tricks on me. Until one afternoon when I bent down to give some coins to the lady on the corner. She grabbed my hand tightly. Her fingers were cold and bony, but her grip was firm. She looked me straight in the eyes and said with a raspy voice, "You have been good to me all these months. Let me return the favor. Do not go back to your boarding house today. Find a simple hotel. Stay there tonight. Tomorrow morning I will tell you something that will change your life." I froze. Her look was serious, urgent. There was no madness in her eyes, only certainty. Why, I managed to ask. She shook her head. "Trust me, please." I released her hand slowly and walked away confused. What did she mean? Why should I not return to my boarding house? What did she know that I did not? I walked aimlessly for a while with my heart racing. Part of me wanted to ignore her words. I thought maybe she was senile, that she was confused. But another part of me, the part that had felt those strange stares and those footsteps in the dark, told me to listen. In the end, I decided to listen to her. I looked for a cheap hotel near downtown. I paid with the little I had saved and went up to a small room with a hard bed and a window that looked out onto an alley. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were wrinkled, stained, tired. All my life I had worked with these hands. I had cooked, cleaned, cared, and now I was here in an unknown hotel following the advice of a woman who lived on the street. I did not sleep that night. I stayed awake looking at the ceiling, waiting for dawn to know what that woman had to tell me. Dawn arrived, slowly filtering through the dirty window of the hotel. I had not slept. Every noise in the hallway startled me. Every car that passed on the street made me think about the absurdity of my situation. I was in a cheap hotel following the advice of a stranger, while my room at the boarding house remained empty. I got up with an aching body. I washed my face with cold water and left without breakfast. I was not hungry. I only had questions. The lady was still on her corner, as always, as if she had not moved all night. But when she saw me arrive, her eyes lit up with something like relief. "You did well not to return," she said before I could speak. I knelt in front of her, not caring that people passed by us looking with curiosity. "What is happening? What do you know?" She looked around as if making sure no one was listening to us. Then she leaned towards me and spoke in a low voice. "I saw a man prowling around your boarding house 2 days ago, then yesterday afternoon. He was looking towards your window, waiting for something." My heart skipped a beat. "What man?" "Tall, dark hair. He dressed well, not like the people around here. He had a black bag in his hand." She paused. "He looked like you. In the eyes, in the shape of the mouth." I ran out of air. "Michael, are you sure?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. She nodded. "I live here on this corner. No one sees me, but I see everything. That man did not come to visit you. He came to do something, and it was not anything good." My hands were trembling. I wanted to say she was wrong, that Michael would never do something like that, but the words did not come out. Because deep down, something in me already knew it. I had felt his coldness. I had seen his indifference. And now this. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Thank you for warning me." She touched my arm gently. "You have fed me when no one else did." It was the least I could do. I walked away from her stunned. My legs barely supported me. I walked aimlessly for a while, trying to process what I had just heard. Michael had been at the boarding house, looking for me, waiting for me. Why I passed in front of the restaurant, but I did not go in. I could not work in this state. Mr. George would see my face and know something was wrong. I needed to think. I needed to understand. I went to a nearby square and sat on a bench. There were pigeons pecking at the ground and children playing in the distance. Everything seemed so normal, so alien to what I was feeling. I thought about Michael, about the boy he had been. I remembered when he was 5 years old and got sick with a high fever. I spent 3 nights awake taking care of him, putting cold cloths on his forehead, praying for him to recover. I remembered his graduation the day he told me he was getting married. At what moment had that boy turned into this? I took my old phone out of my pocket. I had some unread messages. One was from the landlady of the boarding house. I opened it with trembling hands. "Emily, I need to talk to you urgently. Call me." I dialed her number with a racing heart. She answered on the second ring. "Emily, thank God." "Where are you?" Her voice sounded upset. "In a square. What is wrong?" There was a silence, then a sigh. "Last night there was a problem at the boarding house, in your room." My blood froze. What kind of problem? There was a gas leak, in your room specifically, if you had been there. She left the sentence unfinished. The world stopped. A gas leak. In my room, the same night the lady had told me not to return. "How did it happen?" I asked with a voice I barely recognized as mine. "I do not know. The technician came this morning. He said the heater valve was open, but I do not understand. You were always so careful with those things." "I did not open that valve," I said. "I haven't used the heater in weeks." Another silence. Then someone else did it. I hung up. My hands would not stop shaking. Someone had entered my room, had opened the gas valve, had tried to kill me, and that someone was Michael. I went back to the corner where the lady was. She looked at me with sadness, as if she already knew what I had just discovered. "I am sorry," she said simply. I sat on the ground next to her, not caring about the dirt. "My son tried to kill me." The words sounded unreal even as I said them, but they were true as the sun burning our skin in that moment. "I have seen them before," she said softly. "Children who get tired of waiting, who want what their parents have. It is more common than you think." "But I have nothing," I said with bitterness. "Only a small property my husband left. A piece of land worth barely a few $1,000s. For so little." She looked at me with wise eyes. "For some, any amount is enough, especially if they have debts, if they have vices, if they have needs they cannot control." I remembered then the calls. The ones Michael received that made him nervous, the whispered conversations, the times I asked to borrow something and he refused, saying he was tight on money. I always thought it was normal, that we all go through bad streaks. But now everything made sense. Michael needed money, and I was the only thing standing between him and that land my husband had left me. "What do I do now?" I asked, not to her specifically, to the air, to the sky, to whoever wanted to answer. "You go to the police," she said firmly, "and you tell them everything, because if you do not do it, he will try again. And the next time you might not have a crazy old woman to warn you." She was right. I knew it. But going to the police meant admitting that my son wanted to see me dead. It meant putting into words what I could barely accept in my mind. I spent the rest of the day walking through the city. I did not go to work. I did not call Mr. George to explain. I just walked, trying to find the courage to do what I had to do. At nightfall, I went back to the cheap hotel. I paid for another night with the little I had left. I locked myself in the room and finally cried. I cried for the son I had lost, for the life I had built that was now crumbling, for myself and for the naivety of believing that a mother's love was enough to protect me from everything. When I ran out of tears, I washed my face and looked in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my skin pale. I looked older than I was, but there was something new in my look, something hard, something that was not there before, determination. I was not going to let Michael win. I was not going to die in silence so he could cash in on a piece of land he did not even need. If he wanted to kill me, he would have to face me first. The next morning, I looked for the nearest police precinct. It was an old building with peeling paint. I walked in with a firm step, although inside I was trembling. A young officer received me at the counter. "How can I help you, ma'am?" I took a deep breath. "I am here to report an attempted murder." He looked up, surprised. "Can you give me more details?" "My son tried to kill me," I said, and for the first time since I knew it, my voice did not tremble when saying it. They sat me in a small room. Another officer came, older, with an impeccable uniform and a serious look. He introduced himself as Sergeant Miller. "Tell me from the beginning," he said, opening a notebook. And I told him. I told him about the eviction from my house, about the job at the restaurant, about the lady on the corner, and her warning about the gas leak, about Michael prowling around the boarding house. The sergeant took notes without interrupting me. When I finished, he looked at me with an expression I could not decipher. "Do you have proof of any of this?" he asked. "The landlady can confirm the gas." And the lady who warned me saw Michael. "Does that lady have a name? An address?" I realized I did not even know what her name was. "She lives on the street on the corner of Central Avenue and 5th. The sergeant closed his notebook. "Mrs. Davis, I am going to be honest with you. Without concrete evidence, this is difficult to investigate. A gas leak can be an accident, and the testimony of a person without a fixed address does not have much legal weight." I felt like I was sinking. "So you are not going to do anything?" "I did not say that. I am going to open an investigation. I am going to talk to the landlady. I am going to check if there are cameras in the area. But I need you to be prepared for this to take time." I nodded, although inside I felt like I was drowning. Time was exactly what I did not have, because Michael was still out there, and now he would know that I was on alert. I left the precinct with heavy legs. The sun burned the sidewalk and people passed by me in a hurry, each wrapped in their own worries. No one looked at me. No one knew that I had just reported my own son for trying to kill me. I could not go back to the boarding house, that was clear, but I could not keep paying for hotels either. The money I had saved was running out fast. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I walked to the restaurant. Mr. George was in the kitchen as always with his stained apron and a frown while checking a pot. When he saw me enter, his expression softened just a little. "Emily, you did not come yesterday, or the day before." "I am sorry," I said. I did not know what else to say. He wiped his hands on his apron and looked me up and down. "Are you okay?" The simple question almost broke me. No one had asked me that in so long that I had forgotten how it felt for someone to care. I nodded, although we both knew it was a lie. "I need to work," I said. "Please, I need the money." Mr. George sighed. "Okay, but if something happens to you, if you need help, you tell me." Agreed. I nodded again and put on my apron. The work helped me not to think. I peeled potatoes until my hands hurt. I cut onions until the tears falling could be confused with those caused by the stinging. I washed dishes until the hot water turned my skin red. At the end of the day, Mr. George paid me for the full week, even though I had missed 2 days. I said nothing. I just took the money and put it in my pocket carefully. When I left, I looked for the lady on her corner. I needed to talk to someone. I needed someone to understand what I was going through. But that day, she was not there. Her spot was empty. Only the rusty can remained overturned on the ground. A sudden fear invaded me. What if something had happened to her? What if Michael had discovered that she had warned me? I walked through the nearby streets looking for her, asking other homeless people if they had seen her. No one knew anything. No one remembered seeing her. I went back to the hotel with a tight chest. I went up to my room and sat on the bed looking at the phone. I had 3 missed calls, all 3 from a number I knew very well. Michael had not left voicemails, just the calls, insistent, as if he knew I was avoiding him. I went to bed without dinner. Hunger was a dull ache in my stomach, but I had no strength to go out to find food. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but every noise startled me. Every footstep in the hallway made me hold my breath. At some point in the early morning, I finally fell into a restless sleep. I dreamed of Michael as a child. He had a fever and was calling me from his bed. I ran towards him, but the room got longer and longer. I never managed to arrive. And his voice became more and more desperate until it turned into a scream. I woke up sweating. The clock showed 5 in the morning. Outside it was still dark. I got up and washed my face. There was no point trying to sleep anymore. I went down to the lobby. The night clerk was dozing behind the counter. He did not see me leave. The streets were empty, only some early workers walking to their jobs. I arrived at the corner where the lady always was hoping to find her there, but it was still empty. I sat on the ground in the same spot where she used to be and waited. I did not know what else to do. The sky began to clear slowly, painting itself in gray and orange tones. The city was waking up around me. That was when I saw her. She was walking slowly along the sidewalk, dragging her feet with a plastic bag in her hand. When she saw me sitting in her place, she stopped surprised. "What are you doing here so early?" she asked. I stood up quickly. I thought something had happened to you. You were not here yesterday." She smiled tiredly. "There is a shelter that opens on Thursdays. They serve hot food. I went there." She lifted the bag. "They gave me clean clothes. I felt an enormous relief. I went to the police. I told them everything." Her expression turned serious. "And what did they say? That they are going to investigate, but that they need proof, that without proof they cannot do much." She nodded slowly. "That is how it always works. The poor need proof. The rich only need words." We stayed in silence. I did not know if Michael was rich, but he definitely had more than me. He had contacts. He had a house. He had a life I had helped build and from which I was now completely excluded. "What are you going to do?" she asked me. "I do not know," I admitted. "I cannot go back to the boarding house. I cannot keep paying for hotels. And I have nowhere to go." She looked at me with those eyes that had seen too much. "There is a women's shelter on 7th Street. It is not pretty, but it is safe. You can stay there while you resolve things." The idea of going to a shelter turned my stomach. I had worked my whole life. I had a house, a family, a normal life. And now I was considering going to a shelter as if I were just another homeless person. But that was exactly what I was now, right? A homeless woman. A woman whose own son wanted to see her dead. "Thank you," I said. "I will think about it." I went to the restaurant straight from there. Mr. George was already preparing the ingredients for the day. He saw me arrive and said nothing, just pointed towards the aprons. I worked all morning in silence, grateful for the distraction. During my midday break, I went out to get some air. I sat in the alley behind the restaurant where the empty vegetable boxes piled up. I took out my phone and stared at the missed calls from Michael. Part of me wanted to answer him. I wanted to confront him, ask him why, ask him how he had come to this. But another part of me knew that would only put him on alert. If he suspected I knew something, he could act faster. He could be more careful. The phone rang in my hand. It was him again. This time, before I could think much, I answered. "Mom?" His voice sounded relieved. "Finally, you answer. I have been worried." The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. "Worried? Yes, I have been calling you. Where are you? Why are you not at the boarding house?" So he already knew. He had probably gone looking for me, and the landlady told him I had not slept there. "I am with a friend." I lied. I needed a change of scenery. There was a pause. "What friend? I thought you didn't know anyone here. I met people at work," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Why so much interest, Michael? I thought you didn't want to know anything about me anymore." "It is not like that, Mom. I just wanted you to have your space. But you are still my mother. I worry about you." The words were correct, but the tone was empty. It was like listening to an actor reciting a poorly written script. "I have to hang up," I said. "I am working." "Wait. I need to talk to you about one thing. About the papers for Dad's land. There are some documents I need you to sign. It is to renew the taxes. Can you come home this weekend?" There was the real reason for his call. The papers, the land, the inheritance that was worth more than my life. "I cannot this weekend," I said. "I am busy. It is important, Mom. If we do not renew the taxes, we can lose the property." "Then lose it," I said, before hanging up. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my temples. I had been more direct than I intended. Now he would know something was wrong. I went back inside. Mr. George looked at me worried, but asked nothing. I finished my shift on autopilot with my mind elsewhere. When I left, I looked for the address the lady had given me. The shelter was a gray, 2-story building. There was a line of women waiting outside, some with children, others alone like me. I stood at the end of the line. A social worker with a clipboard was writing down names. When my turn came, she looked at me with professional fatigue. Name and age. Emily Davis, 69 years old. She wrote without looking at me. Domestic violence situation. I hesitated. Did this count as domestic violence? My son. He kicked me out of the house. She looked up for the first time. Something in my face must have told her there was more to that story. It can happen. There is a bed available tonight. They gave me a clean sheet and showed me a large room with bunk beds. There were other women there, some young, others my age, all with the same lost look, all trying to understand how they had arrived there. I stored my few belongings under the bed assigned to me and sat on the thin mattress. This was my life now, a shelter, a borrowed bed, no place to call home, but at least I was alive. And while I was alive, I could fight. I spent 5 nights at the shelter. 5 nights listening to the crying of babies, the whispered conversations of women who could not sleep, the creaking of bunks every time someone moved. The place smelled of cheap detergent and accumulated desperation. During the day, I worked at the restaurant. Mr. George had noticed my fatigue but did not ask. I was grateful for his silence. I did not have the strength to explain how a 69-year-old woman had ended up sleeping in a shelter for the homeless. On the 6th day when I arrived at work, Mr. George was waiting for me at the back door. He had a frown and his arms crossed. "I need to talk to you," he said. My heart skipped a beat. Was he going to fire me? I could not lose this job. It was the only stable thing I had. "Come with me," he said, and took me to his small office at the back of the restaurant. It was a narrow room with an old desk and walls full of receipts pinned with tacks. He sat down and pointed to the other chair. "Sit down." I obeyed with my hands clasped in my lap. "A woman came yesterday asking for you," he said. "Young, well-dressed. She said she was your daughter-in-law." My blood froze. "What did she want? Asking where you lived. She said your son was worried because you were not answering the phone, that they wanted to make sure you were okay. What did you tell her that I did not know? That you came to work and left. Nothing more." He looked me straight in the eyes. "Emily, you are in trouble." The words got stuck in my throat. I wanted to say no, that everything was fine, but my face gave me away. Mr. George sighed. "No, that woman did not look worried. She looked like she was hunting." He was right. Michael was hunting me, and now he was using his wife to track me. "Thank you for not telling her anything," I managed to say. "Be careful," said Mr. George, "and if you need something, even if it is just someone who knows where you are in case something happens, you tell me." I nodded and left the office with shaky legs. I worked the rest of the day constantly looking towards the door, expecting to see Michael's wife appear at any moment. That afternoon when I left the restaurant, I went straight to the corner where the lady always was. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to vent before exploding. She was there sitting in her usual spot with the can in front of her. When she saw me arrive with my face composed, she made space next to her. "Tell me," she said simply. I told her about Michael's call, about his wife's visit to the restaurant, about how I felt trapped, not knowing what to do. She listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she remained thoughtful. "Do you know what surprises me most about all this?" she said finally. "That he thinks you are stupid. He thinks you do not realize, that you can be manipulated easily." She was right. Michael had always treated me like that, as if I were naive. As if I did not understand how the world worked. "Use that to your favor," she continued. "Let him think he has control. Meanwhile, you prepare your defense. What defense? I have nothing, not even proof of what he did." She looked at me with that wisdom that only comes from living on the street. "The evidence is there. You just have to know where to look. The landlady of your boarding house can testify about the gas. The technician who checked the installation has a report, and I saw your son that night. The police officer said your testimony does not count much because you do not have a fixed address." "Then we have to give me one," she said with a sad smile, "or get something else that makes me credible." I did not understand what she referred to until 2 days later. It was Friday morning. I arrived at the restaurant early as always, but when I entered through the back door, I found Mr. George talking to a man in uniform. It was not a regular police officer. It was Sergeant Miller. My first instinct was to run away, but Mr. George saw me and signaled for me to come closer. "Mrs. Davis," said the sergeant, "I need to talk to you." Panic squeezed my chest. "Did something happen?" "Yes and no." "We can talk in private. Mr. George lent us his office." The sergeant closed the door and took out a manila folder. "I have been investigating your case," he said, "and I found some interesting things." He opened the folder and showed me some papers. They were bank statements. It took me a moment to realize they were Michael's. "How did you get this?" I asked. "I have my methods," he said vaguely. "Look here, your son has considerable debts, loans he has not paid, credit cards to the limit. And 3 months ago, he took out a loan using the land your husband left you as collateral. I ran out of air. Can he do that? The land is in my name. No, he forged your signature, and that is exactly what I think happened. He showed me another paper. This is the deed he presented to the bank. This is his signature. I looked at the document. The signature looked like mine, but it was not exact. The strokes were different, firmer, more confident. No, I said, that is not my signature. The sergeant nodded, satisfied. That is what I thought. This changes everything. We are no longer talking just about an attempted murder. We are talking about fraud, forgery of documents, and possibly more. What does that mean? It means we have a solid reason to arrest him. The attempted murder is difficult to prove without credible witnesses. But bank fraud is clearer. Banks do not take these things lightly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. You are going to arrest him. I need you to come to the precinct and make a formal statement about the forgery. I also need you to bring any document you have about the land. Original deed certificates, anything that proves you are the sole owner. They are at the boarding house, I said. In a box under my bed. You can go get them. The idea of returning to the boarding house terrified me, but I needed those papers. They were the only proof that the land was mine. I will go with you, said the sergeant, as if reading my mind. You will not be alone. We went that same afternoon. The sergeant drove an unmarked patrol car. I was in the passenger seat looking out the window with my hands clasped in my lap. When we arrived at the boarding house, the landlady was at the reception. She was surprised to see me with a police officer. Emily, what is happening? I need to pick up some things from my room, I said. She gave me the key without asking questions. We went up to the second floor. My room was at the end of the hallway. The door remained locked just as I had left it. I opened it with trembling hands. The room was exactly as I remembered it. The bed unmade, the window with the curtains drawn, the smell of confinement. I knelt by the bed and pulled out the shoebox I kept underneath. Inside were all my important documents, birth certificate, marriage certificate, my husband's death certificate, and the land deed. I took it out carefully and handed it to the sergeant. He checked it quickly. Perfect, he said. This is enough. It was then that I heard him. Footsteps in the hallway. Voices. One of them I recognized immediately. Michael. The sergeant heard it too. He put a hand on my shoulder. Stay here, he whispered. He went out into the hallway. I stood paralyzed by the bed with my heart beating so fast I thought it would pop out of my chest. I heard the sergeant's voice. Can I help you? Who are you? Responded. Michael. What are you doing in my mother's room? I am Sergeant Miller. And you are Michael Davis. This is my mother's room. Where is she? Here I am, I said, stepping out into the hallway. I do not know where I got the courage, but suddenly I felt tired of hiding. Michael looked at me surprised. Then his expression changed to something that pretended to be relief. Mom, thank God. I have been looking for you everywhere. Really, I said. My voice sounded firmer than I felt. Or were you just looking for this? I held up the land deed. His face went pale. I do not know what you are talking about, he said, but his voice trembled slightly. We are talking about the forged signature you used to put my land as collateral for your debts, said the sergeant. We are talking about fraud, and we are also talking about the gas incident in this boarding house. Michael looked at me with a mixture of rage and fear. Mom, what have you been telling this man? What lies have you invented? They are not lies, I said, and you know it. For a moment I thought he was going to deny everything, that he was going to keep acting like the worried son. But something in his face broke. I saw the truth there, the silent admission. I had debts, he said finally with a low voice. I needed the money. And you were not using that land for anything. Then you asked me to sell it to you. You do not try to kill me for it. I did not try to kill you, he said, but without conviction. The gas. Michael. Someone opened the heater valve the night I did not sleep here. Who was it? He did not answer. He just looked at me with eyes I no longer recognized. This was not my son. Or maybe he had always been like this, and I had been too blind to see it. Michael Davis said, the sergeant, you are under arrest for bank fraud and forgery of documents. You have the right to remain silent. While the sergeant read him his rights and put handcuffs on him, Michael did not stop looking at me. and in that look I saw everything we had lost, everything we could never recover. I watched as they took Michael away in the patrol car, his hands cuffed behind his back head, down shame or rage painted on his face. I could not distinguish which of the two. The landlady looked at me from the door with wide eyes, not knowing what to say. Sergeant Miller stayed with me a few minutes more. I need you to come to the precinct tomorrow to make a full statement. Bring all the documents you have. We are going to need every detail. I nodded, unable to speak. I was still processing what had just happened. My son had been arrested. Because of me. Or because of him. I did not even know how to think about it anymore. That night, I did not return to the shelter. I could not face all those women with their own tragedies. I stayed in my room at the boarding house, sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. I did not eat. I did not cry. I just stayed there feeling a huge void in my chest. When dawn broke, I got up like an automaton. I showered, dressed, and went straight to find the lady on the corner. I needed to tell her what had happened. I needed someone to tell me I had done the right thing. But when I arrived at her spot, I found something unexpected. She was there, but she was not alone. There was a young man with her kneeling by her side, talking to her gently. He had a backpack and a camera hanging from his neck. I approached slowly. The lady saw me and smiled tiredly. "Emily," she said, "come. I want you to meet someone." The young man stood up and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. My name is Josh. I am a journalist." I shook his hand with distrust. "Journalist. I am doing a report on homeless people in the city," he explained. "Linda has been telling me her story, and also yours." I looked at the lady, now finally knowing her name. "Linda. You told him about me." She nodded. "I told him everything. About your son, about the gas, about how you helped me every day without knowing me. I do not understand," I said. Why Josh took out a notebook. "Because stories like yours need to be told. People think people on the street are invisible, that they see nothing, that they do not matter." But Linda saw what was happening, and her testimony can be crucial for your case. The sergeant said her testimony carried no weight because she has no fixed address, I said bitterly. "That is why I am here," said Josh. "If I can document her story, if I can show that Linda is a real person with a lucid mind who is a witness to a crime, her testimony gains more value. Besides, media exposure could pressure the authorities to take the case more seriously." I did not know what to think. Part of me wanted to keep all this private away from the public eye. But another part knew Josh was right. Michael had resources contacts. I only had the truth. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Your story, in your own words, and your permission to publish it." We spent the next hour sitting on a nearby bench. I told him everything from the beginning. How Michael had kicked me out of the house, how I had gotten work, how I had met Linda. The warning, the gas, the arrest. Josh took notes quickly, stopping occasionally to ask me specific questions. Linda was sitting next to me, nodding when I mentioned moments where she had been present. "And the proof of fraud?" asked Josh. "You already presented it. I am going to the precinct today. The sergeant has the documents. Can I accompany you? I would like to document that process too." I hesitated, but finally nodded. If this was going to be made public anyway, better it be with the whole truth. The three of us went together to the precinct. Sergeant Miller was surprised to see the journalist, but did not kick him out. Instead, he took me to an interrogation room and asked me to tell everything again, this time recording it officially. I spoke for almost 2 hours. The sergeant interrupted me occasionally to clarify details, to ask me to be more specific on some things. When I finished, I felt exhausted. "We are going to process all this," said the sergeant. "Your son is being processed for bank fraud, that is certain. The attempted murder is more complicated to prove, but with Linda's testimony and the gas evidence, we have a base." "How long is he going to be detained?" I asked. "It depends on if he pays bail. For bank fraud, bail could be around $30,000. If he cannot pay it, he stays until the trial." $30,000. Michael did not have that money. That is why he had tried to steal the land from me in the first place. We left the precinct and Josh walked me to the restaurant. It was time for my shift and I could not miss again. "I'm going to write the article this week," he told me before leaving. "I will send you a copy before publishing it so you approve everything. Does that sound good?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you." Mr. George was waiting for me in the kitchen with a worried expression. There were more customers than usual, and he needed help urgently. I put on the apron and immersed myself in work, grateful for the distraction. But mid-afternoon, everything changed. A woman entered whom I recognized immediately. It was Michael's wife. She looked disheveled with runny makeup and red eyes from crying. She saw me behind the counter and came straight towards me. "You," she said with a trembling voice. "How could you do this to your own son?" Everyone in the restaurant went silent. Mr. George came out of the kitchen hearing the commotion. "I did nothing to him," I said calmly, although inside I was shaking. "He did it to himself. You put him in jail for a stupid piece of land that is not even worth anything. He forged my signature. He tried to steal the only thing I had left from my husband. And when that did not work, he tried to kill me." She shook her head violently. "That is a lie. Michael would never do something like that. You are inventing everything because you are resentful that he asked you to leave his house. His house, I repeated, that house that I helped pay for. That house where I raised that son who now wants to see me dead." "Ma'am," intervened Mr. George with a firm voice, "I need you to leave. You are bothering my employee." "Employee?" She looked at me with contempt. "Look at what you have become. A cook in a dumpy restaurant, and all for your pride. If you had signed the papers like Michael asked, nothing of this would have happened." "You are right," I said. "If I had let myself be robbed in silence, if I had agreed to die when they opened the gas in my room, none of this would have happened. But I am alive, and I am going to fight." She looked at me with pure hate. "This is not going to end here. Michael has lawyers. He is going to get out, and when he gets out, you are going to regret it." "Is that a threat?" asked Mr. George, taking out his phone, "because I can call the police right now." The woman threw me a last look of fury before leaving the restaurant. The silence hung heavy in the air. Customers slowly returned to their conversations. I stood behind the counter, feeling my legs barely holding me up. Mr. George put a hand on my shoulder. "Take the rest of the day off." "No," I said, "I need to work. I need to stay busy." He nodded sympathetically and went back to the kitchen. I kept working, but my hands shook every time I had to carry a plate. That night, when I returned to the boarding house, I found an envelope under my door. I picked it up with a racing heart. Inside was a handwritten note in crude letters. "Drop the charges, or you will regret it. This is your last warning." It was not signed, but it was not necessary. I knew where it came from. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the bed with the light on, watching the door, waiting for someone to try to enter. I had put a chair under the doorknob, but I knew that would not stop anyone if they really wanted to get in. At dawn, I went straight to the precinct. I showed the note to Sergeant Miller. He read it with a frown. "This is witness intimidation. I'm going to add this to the file." "Can't you do something else?" I asked. "Can't you protect me? I can put more frequent patrols near your boarding house. And I recommend you do not go out alone at night. Do you have a safer place to stay?" I thought about the shelter. I thought about asking Mr. George for help. But finally I shook my head. I did not want to keep running. "I will be fine," I lied. But that afternoon, when Linda saw me arrive at her corner, she knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. I showed her the note. She read it in silence and then looked at me with determination. "You have to let Josh publish the article. Now. Do not wait. The more people know what is happening, the safer you will be." "You think so? I know how these things work. Criminals act in the shadow, but when there are lights pointing at them, they hide. If your story comes out in the newspaper, if people know who you are and what they are doing to you, they are going to think twice before touching you." It made sense. I called Josh from Linda's phone. He answered on the second ring. "Publish the article," I told him without preamble. "As soon as possible. Are you sure I still haven't sent you the final version for you to approve?" "I am sure. Just make sure to tell the truth." "I always do," he said. "It comes out tomorrow in the morning edition, and also in the digital version tonight." I hung up and returned the phone to Linda. She squeezed my hand. "You did well," she said. "Now let the truth do its work." The article was published at 6 in the morning. Josh sent me the link by text message. I read it sitting on the edge of my bed with my hands trembling while holding the phone. The headline read, "69-year-old woman reports her son tried to murder her for an inheritance. A homeless woman saved her." There were photos, one of Linda on her corner, another of the boarding house where I lived, and one of me taken the day we went to the precinct. I looked older than I remembered, more tired. But there was something in my eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. The article told everything. My eviction from home, the work at the restaurant, how I had helped Linda, the warning that saved my life, the gas, the forgery of documents, Michael's arrest. Josh had done a good job. He exaggerated nothing. He did not paint me as a martyr, nor Michael as a monster. He just told the facts, letting the story speak for itself. At the end of the article, there was a quote from me that I did not even remember saying. I do not want revenge. I only want justice. And I want other mothers to know they are not alone if their own children betray them. I closed the phone and sat in silence. Now everyone would know my story. There would be no turning back. When I arrived at the restaurant, Mr. George had already read the article. He looked at me with a mix of compassion and respect. "I'm sorry," he said. "I did not know things had gone so far. No one knew I responded." Not even I wanted to admit it. All morning the restaurant customers looked at me differently. Some with pity, others with curiosity, a few with admiration. An older lady approached me at the end of her meal. "I read your story," she said in a low voice. "My son did something similar to me too. I never had the courage to report him. But you did. Thank you for that." She left before I could answer her, leaving me with a lump in my throat. Mid-afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered with caution. "Mrs. Davis, I am Sarah Vance. I am a lawyer. I read your story in the paper, and I would like to offer you my services free of charge." I was speechless. Why would you do that? Because cases like yours need visibility. Because family abuse from children towards elderly parents is more common than people think. And because no one should have to face this alone. I agreed to meet with her that same afternoon. Her office was in a modest building downtown. She was a woman of about 40, with her hair in a bun and an intelligent look. "Let's review everything from the beginning," she said, opening a new folder. "I need every detail, every document, every proof you have." We spent 2 hours reviewing my case. She took notes meticulously, stopping occasionally to ask me specific questions. "The bank fraud is solid," she said finally. "We have the forged signature. We have his testimony. We have the original documents. That is certain. The attempted murder is more complicated but not impossible. Linda's testimony is crucial. And the fact that the gas was opened specifically in your room the night you were not there is very suspicious. What happens now? Now we wait for the legal process. Your son has the right to a lawyer and to defend himself. There will be a preliminary hearing in a few days to determine if there is enough evidence to go to trial. I am going to be there representing you." I left her office feeling a little stronger. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was on my side, that I was not completely alone in this. When I passed Linda's corner, I found her surrounded by people. I approached worried, but then I saw it was nothing bad. It was people who had read the article and wanted to help her. Someone had brought her food, another a new blanket. A woman was offering her a place in a decent shelter. Linda saw me and smiled. "Look what your story has provoked." "Our story," I corrected her. That night, while eating a piece of bread in my room, I received another call. This time it was Sergeant Miller. "Mrs. Davis, I need to inform you that your son posted bail this morning." My heart skipped a beat. How I thought he had no money. Apparently his wife borrowed from some relatives. He is out under strict conditions. He cannot approach you. He cannot leave the city. And he has to report every week to the precinct. But he is free. For now, yes, until the trial. I hung up with trembling hands. Michael was free, out there, somewhere in the city, and even though he had a restraining order that was just a paper, if he really wanted to hurt me, a paper would not stop him. I could not sleep that night. Every noise startled me. Every shadow that passed in front of my window made me hold my breath. I put the chair under the doorknob again and left the light on. At 3 a.m, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped in front of my door. My heart beat so fast, I thought whoever was outside could hear it. I waited. The seconds felt like hours. Then I heard the sound of something sliding under the door. I waited several minutes before daring to move. When I finally went to check, I found another envelope. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photo. It was of me leaving the restaurant. Someone had been following me. Someone had been photographing me, and in the photo with red marker, they had drawn an X over my face. There was no message. It was not necessary. The threat was clear. At dawn, I went back to the precinct. Sergeant Miller saw the photo and his expression hardened. This is a violation of the restraining order. I am going to have him arrested again. And if it was not him, what if it was someone else? Who else would want to threaten you? I thought of Michael's wife, of her furious words in the restaurant, of her look of hate. His wife came to the restaurant a few days ago. She threatened me. The sergeant noted that down. We are going to investigate both. Meanwhile, I recommend you look for a safer place to stay. Do you have any family? Any friends? I shook my head. I had no one, just Linda, who lived on the street, and Mr. George, who had already done enough for me. The shelter then, I said with resignation. But when I arrived at the shelter that afternoon, they told me there were no beds available. It was full. I could try again the next day, but they guaranteed me nothing. I stood on the street with my bag in hand, not knowing what to do. The sun was starting to set. Soon it would be night, and I had nowhere to sleep. That was when I saw Mr. George approaching. He had come looking for me. Linda called me. He said, "She told me what happened, and I came to offer you something. I have a small room above the restaurant. I use it to store things, but we can clean it out. It is not much, but it has a bed and a lock on the door. You would be safer there than at the boarding house." Tears burned my eyes. "I cannot accept. You have already done so much for me." "I am not asking for your permission," he said firmly. "I am telling you the room is available. If you want to use it, use it. If not, it is your decision. But I am not going to let one of my employees sleep on the street when I have space available." I accepted, not because I wanted to abuse his kindness, but because I had no other option, and because deep down I needed to feel safe, even if only for a night. The room above the restaurant was small, as he had said. It had a twin bed, an old wardrobe, and a window that looked out onto an alley. But the door had a strong deadbolt, and the walls were thick. Here at least I could hear if someone tried to enter. Mr. George helped me bring up my few belongings. "The bathroom is downstairs in the restaurant. You can use it whenever you want. And there is food in the kitchen. Do not go hungry. Thank you." It was all I could say. Words were not enough to express what I felt. That night I slept better than in weeks, not because the bed was comfortable or because the place was pretty, but because for the first time in a long time I felt safe. The next morning, unexpected news arrived. Sergeant Miller had arrested Michael's wife. They had found her near the boarding house the night before with a camera in her hand. She had been the one following me. She had taken the photo. "She says she just wanted to scare you," the sergeant explained over the phone, "that she wasn't going to hurt you for real. But that does not matter. Witness intimidation is a serious crime. She is going to spend a few days detained while we process the charges." I hung up feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Michael's wife was not a bad person. She was just desperate trying to save her husband, but her actions had crossed a line. The preliminary trial was scheduled for the following week. Sarah Vance prepared me for days, making me review my testimony over and over, anticipating the questions Michael's lawyer might ask me. "They are going to try to paint you as a resentful mother," she warned me. "They are going to say you invented everything because you were angry he asked you to leave his house. You have to stay calm. You have to stick to the facts." I practiced my testimony until the words felt mechanical, but I knew it was necessary. The trial would not be won with emotions. It would be won with evidence. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived like a storm you see coming, but hits you hard anyway. I woke up early before dawn and sat on the edge of the bed looking at the clothes I had prepared the night before. A simple gray dress, shoes worn but clean. It was the best I had. Sarah passed to pick me up at the restaurant at 7 in the morning. She carried a leather briefcase and a serious expression. "Ready?" she asked me. I was not, but I nodded anyway. The courthouse was an old building with dark hallways and a smell of old papers. There were people waiting on benches outside the rooms, whole families, lawyers in expensive suits talking in low voices. Everything seemed intimidating and alien to me. We entered the courtroom. It was smaller than I had imagined. There were wooden benches, a stand where the judge would be, and 2 tables facing the front for the lawyers. At one of them I saw Michael sitting next to his lawyer. He was wearing a suit I did not know. He must have bought it specially for this, or maybe he had kept it hidden all this time. He did not look at me when I entered. He kept his eyes front, as if I did not exist. I sat behind Sarah's table. Linda was sitting on the public benches. She greeted me with a discreet gesture. Josh, the journalist, was also there with his notebook, and Mr. George, who had closed the restaurant for the morning, to accompany me. The judge entered and we all stood up. He was an older man, about 60, with completely white hair and thick glasses. He sat down and began reviewing the documents in front of him. "Good," he said finally. "We are here for the preliminary hearing in the case of Emily Davis versus Michael Davis. The charges are bank fraud, forgery of documents, and attempted murder. The prosecution is ready to present its arguments." Sarah stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." During the next hour, she presented all the evidence. The forged signature on the bank documents, Michael's bank statements showing his debts, the technician's report on the gas leak in my room, the landlady's testimony. Everything was there, organized and clear. Then it was my turn to testify. I went up to the stand with trembling legs. I swore to tell the truth with my hand on a worn Bible, and I began to tell my story. I spoke about how Michael had asked me to leave his house, about how I had found work at the restaurant, about my conversations with Linda, about the night she warned me not to return to the boarding house, about the gas. Michael's lawyer interrupted me several times with objections. "That is speculation, Your Honor. The witness is assuming intentions she cannot prove." Sarah responded to each objection with professional calm. When my testimony finished, it was the turn of Michael's lawyer to question me. He was a young man about 30, with an impeccable suit and rehearsed smile. "Mrs. Davis," he began with a soft tone, "is it true that you and your son had disagreements regarding the handling of your finances?" "No," I replied. "He never consulted me about my finances. But you were aware that he had economic problems. I found out later when he forged my signature. Is it not possible that you misunderstood the situation, that your son needed help, and you in your vulnerable situation felt attacked?" "I did not misunderstand anything," I said firmly. "My son forged my signature to use my property as collateral for his debts, and when that was not enough, he tried to kill me with a gas leak. That is a very serious accusation. Do you have any direct proof that your son opened the gas valve?" Linda's testimony. "She saw him prowling around my boarding house that night." The lawyer smiled. "Ah, yes. Linda, a woman without a fixed address, without verifiable identification, without records we can consult. Do you really expect this court to accept the testimony of someone whose identity we cannot even confirm?" "Linda saved my life," I said, "and her testimony is as valid as that of any other person." "Your Honor," intervened Sarah, "the credibility of a witness is not determined by their housing situation." The judge nodded. "Continue, counsel." The interrogation continued for another half hour. Michael's lawyer tried to discredit every part of my story. He insinuated that I was inventing things out of spite, that I was confused by my age, that I had misunderstood my son's intentions. But I kept calm. I answered every question with the truth. I did not let myself be intimidated. When my testimony finally ended, I returned to my seat trembling. Sarah squeezed my hand. "You did well," she whispered. Then it was Linda's turn. She went up to the stand in her donated clothes, clean but worn. She swore to tell the truth and began to testify. She spoke about how she had met me, about the times I gave her food and money, about the night she saw Michael prowling around my boarding house with a bag in his hand. Her voice was clear and her memory precise. Michael's lawyer tried to discredit her, too. "How can you be sure it was my client?" "Do you have any photo?" "I do not need a photo," replied Linda with dignity. "I have eyes, and I saw that man sitting there lurking where he should not be." When the testimonies finished, the judge took a recess. We went out to the hallway to wait. Sarah seemed optimistic. "The fraud is solid," she told me. "That goes to trial for sure. The attempted murder is harder to prove, but we presented a strong case." Half an hour later, we went back inside. The judge had his decision ready. After reviewing the evidence presented, he said, "I consider there is probable cause to proceed with the charges of bank fraud and document forgery." Regarding the charge of attempted murder, although the evidence is circumstantial, There are enough suspicious elements to merit a deeper investigation. The case will proceed to full trial. I felt like I could breathe again. Michael would continue facing the charges. Justice would take its course. The months that followed were the strangest of my life. While we waited for the date of the full trial, my routine became a strange mix of normality and constant tension. I worked at the restaurant during the day. I slept in the room above the kitchen at night. And every week I met with Sarah to prepare my final testimony. But something had changed in me. I was no longer just the woman who had been kicked out of her house. I was no longer just the victim. I was turning into someone different, someone stronger. Josh's article had an impact none of us expected. Other women began to contact me, women who had gone through similar situations, daughters who had abandoned their mothers, sons who had stolen their pensions, families that had disintegrated due to greed. One afternoon, while cleaning tables at the restaurant, an older woman entered. She must have been about 70, with hair dyed a mahogany shade and hands full of rings. She sat at a corner table and waited for me to approach. "Emily Davis," she asked when I arrived with the menu. "Yes," I responded cautiously. "I read your story. My name is Alice Dalton, and I came to offer you something." She introduced herself as the director of an organization that helped elderly people in situations of family abuse. "We want you to give talks," she explained, "that you tell your story, that you help other women recognize the signs of abuse before it is too late." The idea overwhelmed me. "I am not good at speaking in public." "You do not need to be good," said Alice gently. "You just need to be honest. Your story has power. You can save lives." I agreed to think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. If my suffering could serve to help others, then it had not been in vain. My first talk was at a small community center. There were about 20 women sitting on folding chairs, all over 60, all with stories written on their tired faces. My hands were shaking when I stood in front of them. "My name is Emily Davis," I began, "and my son tried to kill me for a piece of land worth $20,000. The silence in the room was absolute, and then I began to tell. I told them everything. I omitted nothing. The pain, the shame, the fear. But I also told them about hope, about Linda, about the people who had helped me when I needed it most. When I finished, several women had tears in their eyes. One of them raised her hand. "My daughter does the same," she said with a broken voice. "She asks me for money constantly. She threatens me if I do not give it to her. I thought it was my fault, that I had done something wrong." "It is not your fault," I told her, "and you are not alone." After that talk came more. I spoke in churches and day centers for the elderly and support groups. Every time it was easier. Every time I felt my story served something bigger than myself. Meanwhile, Linda was also changing. The exposure from the article had brought her unexpected help. A nonprofit organization had gotten her a spot in a permanent shelter. She no longer slept on the street. She had a bed, a roof, 3 meals a day. But the most important thing was that we had created a bond. We saw each other almost every day. Sometimes she came to the restaurant and Mr. George gave her free food. Other times I went to the shelter to visit her. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me stories of her life before ending up on the street. I told her my fears about the approaching trial. "Do you know what is the strangest thing about all this?" I told her one afternoon while drinking coffee at the shelter. "That my son kicked me out of his life, but I found a new family. You, Mr. George, Sarah, even Josh. Everyone has become the family I never thought I would have." Linda smiled. "Sometimes God closes doors so we find windows, or in our case, so we find street corners." We laughed together. It was the first time in months I could truly laugh. The trial was scheduled for early December. 2 weeks before Sarah called me with news. "Michael's lawyer wants to make a deal," she told me. "He is offering to plead guilty to bank fraud in exchange for you dropping the attempted murder charge." "What does that mean?" "It means he would go to prison for fraud, probably between 3 and 5 years, but he would not face charges for trying to kill you. It is a shorter sentence. And what do you think?" There was a pause. "I think the attempted murder charge is difficult to prove. We have strong circumstantial evidence, but we do not have a confession or a direct witness who saw him open the gas valve. A jury could doubt, Accepting the deal guarantees he goes to prison. Rejecting it is a risk. How much time do I have to decide? Until tomorrow. I spent that night sleepless. I walked from one side to the other in my small room thinking about all the options. Part of me wanted to reject the deal. I wanted Michael to face all the charges. I wanted him to pay for having tried to kill me. But another part of me was tired of fighting, tired of reliving the pain over and over. 3 years in prison were enough for him to understand the consequences of his acts. 5 years, even more. The next morning I called Sarah. I accept the deal, I told her, but with one condition. I want him to renounce any right to the land, that he signs legal documents ceding any future claim on my property, and I want a permanent restraining order. I do not want him to approach me ever again, not even when he gets out of prison. I can arrange that, she said. Leave it to me. The deal was closed 3 days later. Michael pleaded guilty to bank fraud and forgery of documents. He signed the papers renouncing any right to my property. The judge imposed a sentence of 4 years in prison without possibility of parole until serving at least 2 years. I did not go to the sentencing hearing. I did not want to see his face when he heard the verdict. Sarah went on my behalf and called me afterwards to give me the news. It is over, she told me. You can move on with your life now. But moving on was not as simple as it sounded. The months that followed were of adjustment, of healing, of learning to live without the constant weight of fear. Mr. George offered me a permanent job at the restaurant with a decent salary. You are no longer just a temp employee, he told me. You are part of this place, and I want you to stay. I accepted with gratitude. The restaurant had become my refuge, my home. I also began to rebuild my financial life. With Sarah's help, I managed to sell the land my husband had left me. It was not worth much, as Michael had said, only $23,000. But it was enough to start over. I used part of the money to rent a small apartment, just a room, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. But it was mine. No one could kick me out of there. No one could tell me there was no room for me. With another part of the money, I helped Linda. I bought her new clothes, shoes, a thick coat for winter. I paid for dental treatment she needed urgently. It was not charity, it was gratitude. She had saved my life. The least I could do was help her improve hers. You did not have to do this, she told me, when I handed her the bags with her new things. Yes, I did, I responded. You gave me a second chance. Let me return the favor. The talks I gave at community centers began to multiply. Alice Dalton, the director of the organization, had officially incorporated me as a volunteer. Now I traveled around the city giving conferences on family abuse towards the elderly. Every time I told my story, I saw faces that recognized themselves in it. Women who nodded with tears in their eyes, men who admitted having gone through similar situations, and always at the end, someone approached to thank me. Your story gave me the courage to report my son, a woman told me after a talk. Thanks to you, my mother finally accepted that what was happening to her was not normal, another told me. Every thank you was a reminder that my suffering had not been useless, that something good had come out of all that pain. A year after Michael's arrest, Josh published a follow-up article. A year later, how Emily Davis rebuilt her life after family betrayal. The article spoke about my work at the restaurant, my talks, my friendship with Linda, about how I had turned my tragedy into a mission. The response was overwhelming. I received letters from all over the country. Some were from women thanking me for giving them a voice. Others were from repentant children who had read my story and realized the damage they were causing to their own parents. One letter in particular made me cry. It was from a young woman who had been considering kicking her mother out of her house for space problems. After reading my story, she had decided to look for another solution. I do not want to be like Emily's son, she wrote. I do not want my mother to end up like her. Thank you for opening my eyes. I kept that letter in a drawer next to others I had received. On difficult days when the memory of the pain was too strong, I took them out and reread them. They reminded me why I had decided to make my story public, why I had decided to keep fighting. 2 years have passed since Michael went to prison, 2 years in which my life has changed in ways I never imagined possible. I wake up every morning in my small apartment, make coffee in my tiny kitchen, and look out the window towards the city that almost destroyed me, but finally gave me a second chance. Mr. George's restaurant remains my daily refuge. Now I am in charge of the kitchen. He says my food has a special flavor that people come specifically for my stews. I do not know if it is true or just his way of making me feel valuable, but I like to believe him. Mr. George has become something more than a boss. He is the brother I never had, the friend who appeared when I needed him most. Sometimes on quiet afternoons we sit in the kitchen to drink coffee, and he tells me stories of his youth. I tell him mine, and we laugh about how life has strange ways of putting the right people in your path just when you are about to give up. Linda continues living at the shelter, but she no longer spends her days sitting on a corner. Now she works as a volunteer in a soup kitchen. She helps serve food to other homeless people. She says it is her way of giving back what others gave her when she needed it most. We see each other at least 3 times a week. Sometimes I go visit her at the shelter. Other times she comes to the restaurant and we have dinner together after I close. We talk about everything, about our past lives, about our fears, about our dreams for the future. She is the sister I chose, the family I built with my own hands. Did you know today is exactly 2 years since I gave you that warning? She told me a few days ago while sharing a plate of chicken and rice in the empty restaurant. I did not know. But thinking about it, I realized how much had changed since that night. The woman who agreed not to return to her boarding house on the advice of a stranger no longer exists. In her place is someone stronger, someone who knows that kindness is not weakness and that asking for help is not shame. My talks at community centers have expanded. Now I travel to other cities. Alice Dalton's organization pays me a small stipend for every conference. It is not much, but added to my salary from the restaurant, it is enough to live with dignity. Every time I go up on a stage and see those tired faces looking at me with hope, I remember why I do this. It is not just for me, it is for all the women who are going through what I went through, for all the mothers who feel invisible, disposable, without value. You are not a burden, I always tell them. You are human beings with dignity, with rights, with stories that deserve to be told. And if someone, even if it is your own family, makes you feel less than that, then that someone is wrong, not you. After every talk, lines of women form wanting to talk to me. Some want to give me a hug. Others need advice on how to report their abusive relatives. Some simply need someone to listen to them. I stay with each one the time they need, because I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like for no one to listen to you, and if I can give them even 10 minutes of attention, of validation of company, I do it. I have received 2 letters from Michael since he is in prison. The first arrived a year ago. It was short, cold, full of justifications. It was not my intention to hurt you, it said. I was just desperate. I hope you can forgive me someday. I did not answer it. The second letter arrived 3 months ago. It was different, more honest, more broken. He spoke of how he had had time to think in prison, about how he finally understood the magnitude of what he had done, about how he lived with the guilt every day. I do not expect your forgiveness, he wrote at the end. I do not deserve it. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, really sorry, and that if I could turn back time and do things differently, I would. I kept that letter in the same drawer where I keep the others, the ones from women thanking my story, the ones from repentant children, all together, reminding me that life is complex, that people can be good and bad at the same time. That forgiveness is not always possible, but understanding is. I do not know if I will be able to forgive Michael someday. Honestly, I do not know if I want to. What he did almost cost me my life. It cost me my home, my safety, my faith and family. Those are wounds that do not heal easily. But I have learned that I do not need to forgive him to move on, that I can carry the pain and still build a beautiful life, that I can remember what happened without letting it define me. Sarah has become a close friend. We have lunch together once a month. She tells me about her other cases. I tell her about my conferences. Sometimes she asks me for advice on how to approach older clients who have gone through situations similar to mine. You have a gift for this, she told me the last time we saw each other, to connect with people, to make them feel seen. Maybe she is right. Or maybe it is just that I have been in their place. I have felt what they feel. And that genuine empathy is something that cannot be faked. The apartment I rented has become my sanctuary. It is small, yes. The walls are thin, and sometimes I hear the neighbors argue. But it is mine. No one can kick me out. No one can tell me there is no room for me here. I have decorated the walls with photos. One of Linda and me the day I helped her move to the shelter. Another of Mr. George and me in front of the restaurant. One more of my first conference, with all those women clapping after I finished speaking. I do not have photos of Michael. I do not have photos of my previous life. That life ended. And although it hurts to admit it, it was the best thing that could have happened. Because it forced me to rebuild myself. It forced me to discover who I was beyond being a mother, beyond being a wife, beyond all the roles others had assigned me. I discovered I'm strong. I am. That I am capable. That I can survive even when everything collapses around me. A few weeks ago, Alice offered me a formal job in the organization. "We need someone like you," she told me. "Someone who has lived this. Someone who can lead our support program for victims of family abuse." I told her I would think about it. It is an incredible opportunity. But it also means leaving the restaurant, leaving the place that gave me shelter when I needed it most. I spoke to Mr. George about it. I expected him to get upset, to tell me I was abandoning him. But instead, he smiled. "Emily," he told me, "I gave you work because you needed it, but I always knew you were destined for something bigger. If this opportunity makes you happy, take it. You will always have a place here if you decide to return." His words made me cry, because they confirmed something I had started to understand, that good people exist, that kindness is not a weakness, that helping others without expecting anything in return is what makes us human. I accepted the job. I start next month. I am going to lead a team of social workers and volunteers who help older people in abuse situations. I am going to design programs. I am going to give training. I am going to continue giving conferences. But now, as an official part of my job, it is terrifying and exciting at the same time. Yesterday, while walking back to my apartment after work, I passed by the corner where Linda used to sit. There is no one there anymore. But I stopped anyway. I stood in that spot, remembering. I remembered the first time I gave her some coins. I remembered all the times we looked at each other in silence. Two women invisible to the world, but visible to each other. I remembered the night she grabbed my hand and told me not to go back to my boarding house. That warning saved my life. But more than that, it changed the course of my existence. It took me down a path I would never have chosen, but now would not change for anything. Because yes, I lost my son. I lost my home. I lost the life I knew. But I gained something much more valuable. I gained my dignity. I gained my voice. I gained the certainty that I am stronger than I ever imagined. And I gained a new family. Not of blood, but of choice. Linda, Mr. George, Sarah, Alice, Josh. All the women I have met in my conferences. Everyone who helped me when I was at my lowest point. This morning, while drinking coffee in my apartment, I received a message from Linda. "Breakfast together today, I have something to tell you." I answered yes immediately. Because that is what family does. It shows up. It is present. It is there in good and bad moments. I put on my coat, the one I bought with the money from the sale of the land, and went out towards the diner where we had agreed to meet. The sun was shining. It was cold but not unpleasant. The city was waking up around me, full of life, full of possibilities. And while I walked, I thought about everything that had happened, about how far I had come, about the woman I had been and the woman I had become. I am no longer the 69-year-old lady who was kicked out of her house. I am no longer just the victim of her son's betrayal. I am Emily Davis. I am a survivor. I am a fighter. I am living proof that it is never too late to start over. And if my story can help even one person find the courage to get out of an abusive situation, then every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of fear will have been worth it. Because in the end, life is not about what happens to us. It is about what we do with what happens to us. And I chose not to stay in the role of victim. I chose to get up. I chose to fight. I chose to convert my pain into purpose, and that more than anything else is my victory. I arrived at the diner and saw Linda waiting for me at a table by the window. When she saw me enter, she smiled, that smile I had seen for the first time 2 years ago on a street corner, that smile that had saved my life. I sat in front of her and took her wrinkled hand between mine. "Thank you," I told her. "Not for the first time. Probably not for the last time." "Why?" she asked, although we both knew the answer. "For seeing me when no one else did. For helping me when you had no reason to do so. For reminding me that there is still goodness in this world." She squeezed my hand. "You did the same for me. We saved each other." And she was right, because that is what people who find themselves in the middle of darkness do. They hold on, they support each other, and together they find the way to the light.